Good afternoon. Been a while since I made a video. Something on my mind lately. As many of you know, I used to be a Catholic. I wasn't born a Catholic. Matter of fact, I used to hate the Catholic religion because I didn't know much about it. Things that I thought I knew turned out not to be true. And I found the Catholic faith to be acceptable and no real issues with me. But then I started seeing some things, some cracks in the armor that bothered me, and I left the Catholic faith. So when I come to you with this video and I am knocking the Catholic Church or knocking the faith or something, this doesn't come as someone who's anti-Catholic, someone who thinks the wrong things, or it's a bunch of misinformation, which is usually what it is. Most people who are anti-Catholic are just very ignorant on what the Catholics actually believe. A big thing with me is the failure of the Papal System. Our Pope right now, or I say the Pope, Francis, is a shining example of failure. He's not a holy man. He has an agenda. It's a leftist type agenda. I think the system went bad when it became political well over 1,000 years ago. Now, some people say, well, now, you know, we've had bad popes and we've had evil popes, but nothing changed in the Catholic Church. That's not true. A little research shows that's not true. Just in a short time that I was a Catholic, they changed the stance on the death penalty. Now, I realize that has nothing to do with salvation, but they did it. And what about other changes it's made? They call it development of doctrine, that over a period of years it develops. And there are some things that are credible with that. For instance, development of doctrine for the Trinity. But you can find roots of that belief, deep roots of that belief, in the scriptures. When they started making proclamations and saying you have to believe this to be saved, and it's not in the Bible, that's wrong. As well, by the authority of the church, we can do this. No, you can't. Your authority has to come from Scripture. Not Scripture and tradition, not Scripture and old tradition that you kind of make up from what I've seen on some of this stuff, or some bishop wrote something early on and then somehow another 1,000 years later it becomes doctrine. That's not how it works. You have to believe that Mary was ever virgin, or you can't be saved. You have to believe that Mary was received up dead bodily. Basically, she was never buried, or if she was quickly removed. Or you can't be saved. You can't be a Christian. You have to believe that the Pope is the final authority in anything spiritual on the earth. If you can't be saved. You have to believe that the church is the final teaching authority over you, regardless of what Scripture says, or you can't be saved. You know, none of that is in the Scripture. None of it is in the Scripture. So, yes, I am Scripture alone, solo scriptural. Now, I realize that there are writings that the fathers early on wrote, and I respect those writings, and I see where some beliefs come from those writings, and I'm okay with that. But you can't sit there 1,000 years later, almost 2,000 years later, and say, my beard's looking kind of scraggly, I'm sorry about that, and say, you have to believe this or you can't be a Christian. Now, I do understand why they say that you have to believe that the Eucharist is a transubstantiation. I understand why they say that, and seeing how that's kind of a core belief in the church, I can see why they would say you have to believe that to be a Christian or to be Catholic. Polls say that only 50% of Catholics believe that, though. That just goes to show that most Catholics aren't taught very well. The Papal System is a failure. And I'm not trying to grind down the Catholic faith so much as just point out the big kink in the in the armor. It's basically the Reformation. The main reason for the Reformation is because of bad behavior by popes. Most of the Reformation is based on challenge to the authority of the Pope because the Pope behaved badly. With the exception of the Church of England. When they broke away, it's because the king wanted to have another wife for nefarious reasons, and he couldn't get the Pope to agree with him for a divorce. So he just said, well, we'll own your churches now, and you're not Catholic no more. You're Catholic under English rule. And then they start to change their beliefs to be more of a Protestant type belief. You know, most people looking at how they do their masses and how the Catholic do their masses wouldn't see any difference unless they knew what they were looking at. I think that's about all I'm going to say. I'm done.